Focus on yourself and stay silent. Audiobook. Introduction. You are tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. You are tired of giving your best energy to people who do not appreciate it. Tired of working hard while feeling like you are going nowhere. Tired of knowing exactly what you need to change, but somehow never changing it. Here is what nobody tells you. The moment you stop performing for the world and start building yourself in silence, everything shifts. Your decisions get sharper. Your confidence stops depending on anyone else. Your life starts moving in a direction that actually means something to you. What you are about to hear is not motivation that fades by tomorrow. This is a complete guide to reclaiming your focus, your energy, your discipline, and your identity. Chapter. Your thinking will change. And when your thinking changes, your entire life follows. Stay with this. Everything you have been searching for begins right now. Chapter 1. Silence your mind and reclaim your inner power. There is a kind of noise that nobody talks about. It is not the sound of traffic outside your window. It is not the notifications on your phone. It is not the conversations happening around you. The loudest noise you will ever face in your life is the one happening inside your own head. It never stops. It runs from the moment you open your eyes in the morning to the moment you finally fall asleep at night. And even then, it follows you into your dreams. Most people live their entire lives without ever addressing this noise. They wake up tired, go through their day feeling scattered and overwhelmed, and fall asleep still carrying the weight of 1,000 unfinished thoughts. They wonder why they feel stuck. They wonder why, despite working hard and trying their best, something always feels like it is missing. The answer is simple. They have never learned how to silence their minds. This is where your transformation begins. Not with a new routine, not with a new goal, not with a new plan. Begins with silence, real silence, the kind that comes from inside. Think about the last time you sat in complete quiet. No phone, no music, no television, no conversation, just you and your thoughts. For most people, that experience feels deeply uncomfortable. Within seconds, the mind starts racing. It brings up old regrets. It creates new worries. It replays conversations that happened days ago. It rehearses arguments that may never happen. It pulls you into the past and pushes you into the future, doing everything it can to keep you anywhere but the present moment. That restlessness you feel is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that your mind has been running on autopilot for too long. And when something runs on autopilot long enough, it starts running in circles. It stops moving forward. It just spins. Here is something important to understand. Your mind is a tool. It is one of the most powerful tools you will ever have access to. But like any tool, it needs to be controlled by you. When you do not control your mind controls you. And a mind that is controlling you instead of serving you will keep you trapped in fear, doubt, self-criticism, and confusion. Reclaiming your inner power starts the moment you decide to take back control of your own thinking. Not by fighting your thoughts, not by suppressing them, but by learning to observe them, understand them, and choose which ones deserve your attention and which ones need to be released. The ancient Stoic philosophers understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest emperors who ever lived, wrote in his personal journal about the importance of guarding the mind. He did not have a perfect life. He led a massive empire through wars, plagues, and political betrayals, and yet he maintained a calm and focused mind. How? Because he understood that the world outside was beyond his control, but the world inside his mind was entirely his responsibility. He wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. He understood that the moment you realize this, you find your strength. That strength is available to you right now. It has always been available to you. The only thing separating you from it is the noise in your head that keeps telling you otherwise. So how do you begin to silence that noise? The first step is awareness. Before you can change anything, you need to understand what is actually happening. Most people are not aware of how negative, chaotic, or self-defeating their inner dialogue really is. They have been listening to it for so long that it sounds like the truth. They do not even recognize it as a voice anymore. They just believe it. Starting today, pay attention to your thoughts the way you would pay attention to a stranger speaking to you. When a thought enters your mind, pause and ask yourself one simple question. Is this thought helping me or hurting me Is it pushing me forward or pulling me backward? Is it based on reality or is it based on fear? You will quickly discover that a large percentage of your mental activity is based on fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough, fear of what could go wrong, fear of the unknown. The mind is wired to look for danger. It was designed that way for survival. But in modern life, that survival instinct often works against you. It sees danger where there is none. It creates problems that do not exist. And it keeps you small when you are meant to grow. The moment you identify a fearful thought as just a thought and not a fact, you take away its power over you. You do not have to argue with it. You do not have to prove it wrong. You simply observe it and choose not to act on it. The second step is creating space for stillness. Silence does not just happen. In a world that is constantly demanding your attention, you have to choose silence on purpose. You have to protect it. You have to build it into your life the way you build in meals and sleep. Start small. Give yourself 10 minutes every morning before you reach for your phone, before you speak to anyone, before you consume any information from the outside world. Just sit, breathe slowly, and let your mind settle. In the beginning, this will feel strange. Your mind will resist. It will tell you that you are wasting time. It will bring up your to-do list. It will remind you of everything you need to worry about. And your only job during those 10 minutes is to keep returning to your breath. Every time your mind wanders, and it will wander, gently bring it back. No frustration, no judgment, just return. This practice, done consistently over weeks and months, will change how your mind functions throughout the entire day. You will notice that you react less and respond more. You will notice that small problems no longer feel catastrophic. You will notice that you think more clearly, make better decisions, and feel a sense of calm that was not there before. That calm is your natural state. It is what you feel when the noise stops, and once you experience it, even briefly, you will want to protect it with everything you have. The third step is learning to let go of mental clutter. Your mind right now is probably carrying things that do not belong to it. Other people's opinions about your life, regrets about choices you made years ago, anxiety about a future that has not arrived yet, grudges against people who have moved on while you are still holding the weight of what they did. All of this clutter takes up mental space. And every piece of mental space that is taken up by clutter is a piece that is not available for creativity, clarity, focus, and growth. You cannot think big when your mind is full of small, heavy, useless things. Letting go does not mean pretending things did not happen. It does not mean dismissing pain or ignoring real challenges. It means making a conscious decision that you will not allow the past to occupy your present. It means choosing to put your mental energy into what you can control today rather than what you could not control yesterday. There is a simple exercise that helps with this. At the end of each day, take 5 minutes to write down everything that is weighing on your mind. Do not filter, do not judge, just write it all out. Then go through each item and ask yourself one question. Can I do something about this right now? If yes, write down one action you can take tomorrow. If no, make a conscious choice to release it. It does not serve you. It never did. Over time, this practice trains your mind to stop holding on to things that have no productive purpose. And when your mind stops clinging to the past and stops fearing the future, it becomes fully available for the present. And the present is where all of your power lives. The fourth step is understanding the relationship between silence and self-knowledge. Most people do not truly know themselves. They know their habits, their preferences, their likes and dislikes, but they do not know what drives them at a deeper level. They do not know why they keep repeating the same patterns. They do not know what they actually want versus what they have been conditioned to want by family, society, and social media. Silence is where self-knowledge lives. When the noise quiets down, you start to hear something different. You start to hear your own voice. Not the voice of fear, not the voice of other people's expectations, your real voice, the one that knows what matters to you, the one that has been trying to get your attention for years but could never be heard over all the chaos. That voice will tell you things that no book, no mentor, and no life coach can tell you. It will show you where you have been settling. It will show you where you have been lying to yourself. It will show you what you need to change and what you need to embrace. But you can only hear it in the quiet. This is why the most self-aware people in the world tend to have some kind of stillness practice. Whether it is meditation, journaling, long walks without headphones, or simply sitting in quiet reflection, they have created space to hear themselves. And that self-knowledge becomes the foundation of every good decision they make. The fifth step is protecting your mind from external noise. Even when you work hard to create internal stillness, the world will constantly try to fill it back up. Social media is designed to keep your attention scattered. News is designed to keep you anxious. Conversations filled with gossip and negativity are designed to keep you distracted. And if you are not intentional about what you allow into your mind, you will find your inner peace constantly disrupted by forces that have nothing to do with your actual life. Start treating your mind like a home that you care deeply about. You would not let strangers walk in and throw garbage on your floor. You would not leave your doors open during a storm. You choose what comes in because it is your space. Your mind deserves the same level of care. This does not mean isolating yourself from the world. It means being selective and intentional. It means choosing not to engage with content that leaves you feeling worse than before you consumed it. It means limiting time around people who consistently bring drama, comparison, and low energy into your life. It means choosing conversations that challenge you to think, grow, and see life more clearly. What you feed your mind every day becomes the quality of your thoughts. And the quality of your thoughts becomes the quality of your life. This is not a poetic idea. It is a practical reality that shows up in every choice you make, every relationship you build, and every goal you pursue. The sixth step is recognizing your inner power and choosing to act from it. Inner power is not confidence in the way most people think about it. It is not about being bold or loud or fearless. Inner power is the steady, quiet certainty that you are capable of handling whatever comes your way. It is the knowledge that even when things go wrong, you have the ability to respond with wisdom and dignity. It is the deep trust in yourself that does not require anyone else's validation. That kind of power comes directly from a quiet mind. When your mind is noisy and chaotic, you act from a place of reaction. Something happens, and you immediately respond from your most emotional, least rational state. You say things you do not mean. You make decisions based on fear. You move through your day feeling like everything is happening to you, rather than feeling like you are a person who can shape what happens around you. But when your mind is calm and clear, you act from choice. You see situations more accurately. You respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. You make decisions that align with who you are and where you want to go. You stop being a leaf blown around by the wind and start being someone who can stand firm, regardless of what the weather is doing. That is what reclaiming your inner power actually looks like. Not some dramatic transformation overnight, but a quiet, steady shift in how you relate to your own mind. A shift from being controlled by it to directing it. From being overwhelmed by it to using it with purpose. You have the ability to make this shift. It does not require special talent. It does not require perfect circumstances. It requires only the willingness to start. To choose stillness when the world is loud. To choose clarity when your mind wants to spin. To choose presence when the past and the future are pulling at you from both sides. The journey of personal growth does not begin with changing the world around you. It begins with quieting the noise inside you. It begins with sitting down, breathing slowly, and making a simple but profound decision. The decision to stop running from yourself and start getting to know yourself. The decision to stop reacting and start responding. The decision to take full responsibility for the one thing you have always had complete control over, your own mind. Silence is not empty. It is full of everything you need. The answers you have been searching for are not in another person's words, another motivational video, or another self-help book. They are in the quiet space inside you that you have been too busy and too afraid to visit. Go there, sit with yourself, and begin the most important conversation of your life. The one you have with your own mind in the language of silence. Because when you learn to silence the noise, you do not lose anything. You find everything. You find your clarity. You find your direction. You find your strength. And most importantly, you find yourself. And when you find yourself truly and honestly, you stop needing the world to define you, validate you, or save you. You become your own source of power. And that is where your real life begins. Chapter 2. Stop explaining yourself and let your actions speak. There is a habit that quietly destroys your credibility, drains your energy, and keeps you stuck in a cycle of seeking approval without ever realizing it. That habit is over-explaining yourself. Every time something goes wrong, you rush to justify it. Every time you make a decision, you feel the urge to explain why. Every time someone questions your choices, you immediately launch into a long defense of your actions. And every time you do this, you hand your power over to someone else without even knowing it. Think about the last time you made a decision that felt right to you. Maybe you chose to leave a job, end a relationship, start a new project, or simply say no to something you did not want to do. And then someone questioned it. Maybe they raised an eyebrow. Maybe they said nothing at all but just looked at you a certain way. And suddenly, without being asked, you started explaining. You laid out all your reasons. You made your case. You sought their understanding and waited anxiously to see if they approved. What you were really doing in that moment was asking for permission. Permission to trust yourself. Permission to live your own life. And when you need permission from others to make your own decisions, you are not living your life at all. You are living theirs. The need to explain yourself comes from a deep-rooted fear of being misunderstood. Human beings are social creatures, and the fear of being judged, rejected, or seen in a negative light can be incredibly powerful. So we talk, we defend, we justify, we over-communicate. We believe that if we just explain thoroughly enough, people will understand us, agree with us, and stop judging us. But here is what experience teaches you after enough years of living. Most people have already made up their minds. Your explanation rarely changes their opinion. All it does is show them that their opinion matters more to you than your own. There is a different way to live, a quieter, stronger, more dignified way. It is the way of people who have learned that their actions carry more weight than their words ever could. These are the people who do not announce their plans, do not defend their choices, and do not seek validation at every turn. They simply do the work. They stay consistent. And over time, the results they produce speak louder than any explanation they could have offered. You have seen this kind of person, maybe in your workplace, maybe in your family, maybe someone you admire from a distance. They carry a certain calmness that feels almost unusual in a world where everyone is constantly talking, posting, and performing. They do not need to tell you how hard they are working, because you can see it in what they produce. They do not need to defend their character because their behavior makes the case for them. They do not need your approval because they have something far more valuable. They have their own. Building that kind of self-approval is not about arrogance. It is not about shutting people out or refusing to communicate. It is about developing such a strong inner foundation that you no longer need external reassurance to feel certain about who you are and what you are doing. When you are truly sure of yourself, the need to explain simply fades away, not because you stopped caring about people, but because you stopped depending on their reactions to feel okay about your choices. One of the most powerful things you can do right now is notice when you are over-explaining and ask yourself honestly why. Are you explaining because the other person genuinely needs information? Or are you explaining because you are uncomfortable with the idea that they might not agree with you? There is a significant difference between the two. Communicating information is healthy and necessary. Performing your reasoning for someone else's approval is a quiet form of emotional dependency that costs you more than you realize. Every time you over-explain, you send yourself a subtle but damaging message. You tell yourself that your judgment alone is not enough, that you need outside confirmation before you can feel settled in your decisions. And the more you send yourself that message, the harder it becomes to trust yourself. Over time, you stop making bold decisions because you know you will have to defend them. You start playing small to avoid scrutiny. You choose the safer path not because it serves your growth, but because it requires less justification. That is how the habit of over-explaining quietly shrinks your life. The alternative is not silence for the sake of pride. The alternative is action. Focused, consistent, disciplined action that builds something real over time. When you stop spending energy explaining and defending, you suddenly have a tremendous amount of energy available for creating and building. And what you build becomes the evidence that no argument could ever match. History is full of people who were questioned, doubted, and dismissed, who said nothing and simply kept working. They did not hold press conferences to address their critics. They did not write lengthy letters explaining their vision to people who could not see it. They went back to work. They refined their skills. They stayed committed when everyone around them had already written them off. And eventually, the results they produced became undeniable. Not because they convinced anyone with words, but because they showed everyone with outcomes. This is a principle worth taking seriously in your own daily life. When someone doubts your ability, do not argue, work. When someone dismisses your dream, do not defend it, build it. When someone misunderstands your character, do not launch into a lengthy explanation of who you really are. Show them through your choices, your consistency, and your integrity over time. And if they still do not see it, that is acceptable. Not everyone is meant to understand your journey. Some people are only equipped to see your destination. There is also a deeper personal benefit to releasing the habit of over-explanation. When you stop trying to control how others perceive you, you free yourself from an exhausting mental burden. Think about how much mental energy goes into managing other people's opinions. You rehearse conversations before they happen. You replay them after they end. You worry about what someone meant by a particular comment. You wonder if you said too much or too little. All of that is energy being poured into something you have zero control over. You cannot determine what another person thinks of you. You never could. And the sooner you accept that, the lighter your mind becomes. What you can control is your behavior, your effort, your values, your response to difficulty, your commitment to the standards you set for yourself. These are the things that are actually within your reach. These are the things that, when tended to consistently, build a life and a character that need no defending. Start practicing this in small ways. The next time you feel the urge to over-explain a decision, pause. Ask yourself whether this explanation is genuinely necessary or whether you are just seeking comfort through validation. If it is the latter, sit with the discomfort instead. Let the decision stand on its own. Trust that your actions going forward will communicate more clearly than your words ever could. When someone criticizes your work, resist the immediate impulse to defend it. Instead, listen carefully. If the criticism has merit, use it to improve. If it does not, release it without drama. You do not need to win every conversation. You do not need the last word. You do not need everyone to walk away agreeing with you. What you need is to walk away still aligned with your own values and still focused on your own path. This shift in behavior will feel uncomfortable at first. There will be moments where staying quiet feels almost impossible, where you will want so badly to explain yourself, to clarify, to be understood. And in those moments, remind yourself of this. The people who are meant to trust you will trust you based on what they observe over time. No single explanation will build that trust. Only your actions will. Discipline yourself to let your results do the talking in your professional life. Stop announcing what you are going to do and simply do it. People are rarely impressed by plans and intentions. They are moved by execution. When you deliver quality work consistently, when you meet your commitments, when you show up with reliability and integrity day after day, you build a reputation that is worth more than anything you could ever say about yourself. That reputation becomes your voice, and it speaks without you having to open your mouth. In your personal life, let your character speak for itself. Be kind without announcing your kindness. Be generous without broadcasting your generosity. Do the right thing when no one is watching, not for recognition, but because that is who you are choosing to become. The most genuine version of you is not the version you perform for others. It is the version that shows up when there is nothing to gain and no audience to impress. As you move through your days with less explaining and more doing, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to feel a sense of quiet dignity that you cannot manufacture through any amount of talking. It comes from knowing that you are living in alignment with your values. It comes from trusting yourself enough to act without needing approval. It comes from the evidence you see building around you as your consistent effort produces real, tangible results. That quiet dignity is worth more than being understood by everyone. It is worth more than winning every argument. It is worth more than the approval of people who were never truly invested in your growth to begin with. Your life is your statement. Every choice you make, every commitment you honor, every obstacle you face without collapsing, every standard you hold yourself to when it would have been easier to lower it, all of it is speaking on your behalf constantly. The question is whether you are going to trust that statement or keep interrupting it with unnecessary explanations. Stop interrupting your own story. Do the work. Stay consistent. Keep your head down and your standards high. And let everything you build in silence be the answer to every question anyone ever had about what you are capable of. Chapter 3. Build daily habits that transform your entire life. Most people are waiting for a moment that will never come. They are waiting for the perfect time to start eating better, exercising regularly, reading more, waking up earlier, or working on the goals they have been carrying around in their heads for years. They tell themselves that things will change when life slows down, when they have more money, when the kids get older, when work gets less demanding, when the season changes, when Monday comes around again. But Monday comes and goes. The season changes. Life never slows down, and the person they wanted to become remains exactly where they left them, somewhere in the future, always just out of reach. The hard truth is that transformation does not live in a future moment. It lives in the present one. Specifically, it lives in the small, ordinary, easily overlooked actions you take every single day. Not the dramatic gestures, not the grand declarations, not the week-long motivation bursts that fade before the month is over. The quiet, unglamorous, repeated behaviors that you commit to, even when you do not feel like it, even when nobody is watching, even when the results are not yet visible. Those repeated behaviors are your habits. And your habits are quietly building your future right now, whether you are paying attention to them or not. Here is what most people misunderstand about habits. They think habits are about willpower. They believe that people who are disciplined simply have more inner strength than everyone else. That they wake up each morning with a reservoir of motivation that ordinary people lack. This is completely false. The most disciplined people in the world do not rely on motivation or willpower. They rely on systems. They have designed their daily environment and their daily routines in a way that makes the right behaviors easier and the wrong behaviors harder. They do not fight themselves every morning. They have already made the decision in advance by building a structure that supports who they want to become. Willpower is unreliable. It fluctuates based on your sleep, your stress levels, your hunger, your emotions, and countless other variables you cannot always control. A habit once properly established does not require willpower. It operates below the level of conscious decision-making. It becomes automatic. And when the right behaviors become automatic, your growth becomes inevitable. Understanding how habits actually form is the first piece of practical knowledge that will change everything for you. Every habit follows a simple pattern. There is a trigger, which is a cue in your environment or routine that signals the behavior. There is the behavior itself. And there is a reward, which is the feeling or outcome your brain associates with that behavior. Your brain is constantly looking for shortcuts. When it finds a behavior that produces a reliable reward, it encodes that behavior as a pattern to repeat. Over time, the behavior requires less and less conscious effort because your brain has automated it. This works for both good habits and bad ones. The cigarette smoker does not think carefully each time before lighting up. The late-night phone scroller does not make a deliberate choice to reach for their device. These behaviors have become wired in through repetition and reward. The good news is that the exact same wiring mechanism that creates destructive patterns can be used intentionally to build powerful ones. The key is to start smaller than you think you should. This is where most people go wrong when they decide to change their habits. They come in with enormous ambition and immediately try to overhaul their entire life at once. They decide they are going to wake up at 5 in the morning, meditate for 30 minutes, exercise for an hour, read for an hour, journal, meal prep for the week, and learn a new skill, all starting tomorrow. For 3 days, they manage to sustain this impossible schedule through sheer force of will. On day 4, they miss one thing. On day 5, they miss 2. By the end of the second week, they have abandoned everything and added this failed attempt to the growing list of evidence they carry around that tells them they are not capable of changing. The problem was never their character. The problem was the size of the target they set. When a habit requires enormous effort, your brain resists it. When a habit is so small that it feels almost too easy, your brain accepts it without resistance. And once it is accepted and repeated, it grows naturally. Start with 2 minutes. If you want to build a reading habit, commit to reading 1 page per day. If you want to start exercising, commit to putting on your workout clothes and doing 5 minutes of movement. If you want to meditate, sit quietly for 2 minutes and breathe. These tiny actions feel insignificant. They feel like they could not possibly make a difference, but their real purpose is not the action itself. Their real purpose is the identity shift they create. Every time you follow through on a small commitment, you cast a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. You tell yourself through your actions that you are someone who reads, someone who moves their body, someone who takes care of their mind. And as those votes accumulate day after day, your self-image begins to change. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is trying to build good habits and start seeing yourself as someone who simply has them. That identity shift is the real transformation. The habits that follow from it are just the natural expression of who you have become. The environment you live in plays a far greater role in your behavior than most people acknowledge. Your surroundings are constantly sending signals to your brain that either support your growth or sabotage it. If your phone is the first thing you see when you wake up, you will reach for it. If junk food is on your kitchen counter, you will eat it. If your books are buried under a pile of clutter, you will not read them. If your gym clothes are laid out the night before, you are significantly more likely to exercise. These are not matters of discipline. They are matters of design. Take a serious look at your daily environment and ask yourself honestly whether it is set up to support the person you want to become or the person you are trying to leave behind. Move the things that serve you closer. Make the things that hurt you harder to access. Put your journal on your pillow so you see it before bed. Put a glass of water on your nightstand so hydration is the first thing you do in the morning. Leave your running shoes by the door. Delete the apps that consume your time without adding to your life. These small environmental changes reduce the friction between you and your best habits and increase the friction between you and your worst ones. Another powerful principle that most people overlook is the importance of habit stacking. Instead of trying to find entirely new windows of time in your already busy day, attach new habits to ones you already perform reliably. You already brush your teeth every morning. You already make coffee. You already sit down for lunch. These existing behaviors are anchors. By attaching a new behavior to an established one, you use the momentum of the existing habit to carry the new one forward. After making coffee, sit down and write 3 things you are grateful for. After brushing your teeth at night, do 2 minutes of stretching. Before opening your laptop each morning, spend 5 minutes reviewing your priorities for the day. These combinations feel natural because one behavior flows directly into the next. Over time, the stack becomes a single fluid routine that you move through without effort. Consistency matters infinitely more than intensity. A person who walks for 20 minutes every day will always be in better health over the course of a year than a person who runs a marathon once and then does nothing for 3 months. A person who reads 10 pages every day will always have absorbed more knowledge than a person who reads 300 pages in a single weekend and then does not pick up a book again. The power is in the repetition, not the magnitude. This is a concept that sounds simple but requires a genuine shift in how you measure your own progress. We live in a culture that celebrates big, dramatic results, before and after photos, overnight success stories, dramatic weight loss in 30 days. These stories are compelling because they are visible and immediate, but they are not representative of how lasting change actually works. Lasting change is boring to watch. It is quiet. It happens in increments so small that they are nearly invisible on any given day. But zoom out over months and years, and the compounding effect of those tiny daily improvements becomes staggering. 1% better every day does not feel like much. But 1% better every day for a full year produces results that are almost unrecognizable from where you started. The person who improves by just 1% daily is not the same person 12 months later. They think differently. They carry themselves differently. They handle difficulty differently. They look at their future differently. All because they chose, day after day, to do the small thing when the small thing was available to them. There will be days when you miss. This is not failure. This is being human. The difference between people who build lasting habits and people who abandon them is not that the successful ones never miss a day. It is that when they miss a day, they never miss two in a row. One missed day is an accident. 2 missed days is the beginning of a new habit, and not one that serves you. When you miss, you return the next day without drama and without self-punishment. You pick up exactly where you left off. You do not try to compensate by doubling your effort the next day, because that only adds pressure and increases the likelihood of missing again. You simply return to the normal routine, as if the missed day were a small bump in an otherwise steady road, which is exactly what it is. Your daily habits are not separate from your life. They are not things you do in addition to living. They are the architecture of your life. The person you will be in 5 years is being constructed right now, one repeated behavior at a time. Your health, your relationships, your financial situation, your mental clarity, your emotional resilience, all of it is being shaped every single day by the small choices you make and the ones you avoid. You do not need to wait for a new year, a new month, or a new week. You do not need a perfect plan or a complete overhaul. You need one small action taken today with the genuine intention to repeat it tomorrow. That single act, followed by another and then another, is the beginning of a life that looks entirely different from the one you are living now. The transformation you are looking for is not waiting at some distant destination. It is available to you in this moment, through the most ordinary action you can take right now. Choose one habit. Make it small enough that you cannot fail. Do it today. Do it again tomorrow. And trust the process enough to keep going, even when you cannot yet see the results building beneath the surface. Because they are building. Every single day, whether you can see them or not. Chapter 4. Protect your energy from people who drain you. Nobody talks about this enough. There is a kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you slept last night or how physically demanding your day was. It is a deeper tiredness, a heaviness that settles into your chest and follows you around even when nothing particularly bad has happened. You find yourself drained after certain conversations. You feel lighter the moment certain people leave the room. You notice that some relationships consistently leave you feeling worse about yourself and your life, while others leave you feeling energized, clear, and capable. This is not a coincidence. This is your energy responding honestly to the people in your environment. Your energy is one of the most valuable and finite resources you possess. It determines the quality of your work, the depth of your relationships, the clarity of your thinking, and the consistency of your habits. When your energy is full and protected, you show up as the best version of yourself. You make better decisions. You handle difficulty with composure. You pursue your goals with focus and determination. But when your energy is constantly being drained by the wrong people and the wrong interactions, you have nothing left to give to the things and people that actually matter. You move through your days feeling depleted, irritable, and disconnected from your own purpose. Most people accept this depletion as a normal part of life. They assume that feeling drained is simply the cost of being around other people. But that assumption is wrong. Feeling genuinely tired after a long day of meaningful work is different from feeling emotionally hollowed out after spending time with someone who takes far more than they ever give. The first kind of tiredness is productive. It is the natural result of effort. The second kind is corrosive. It is the result of a relationship dynamic that is quietly stealing from you. The first thing you need to develop is the ability to recognize which people in your life consistently drain your energy. This sounds straightforward, but in practice it can be surprisingly difficult. Some energy-draining people are obvious. They complain constantly. They bring chaos everywhere they go. Every conversation with them revolves around their problems, their drama, and their grievances. You walk away from interactions with them feeling as though you have just run an emotional marathon that you never signed up for. But other energy drains are subtler and therefore more dangerous. There are people who do not create obvious drama but who consistently make you feel inadequate. Every interaction with them leaves you feeling slightly less confident about your choices, your progress, or your worth. There are people who are skilled at making you feel guilty for prioritizing your own needs. There are people who project their own fears and limitations onto your ambitions, disguising their doubt as concern. There are people who are supportive in small doses, but who, over extended periods of time, consistently pull you back toward a version of yourself that you are actively working to move away from. Pay attention to how you feel after spending time with different people in your life. Not during the interaction, because social pressure and habit can mask a great deal during the actual encounter. Pay attention to what you feel an hour afterward, or the next morning when you have had time to settle. Do you feel motivated or discouraged? Do you feel clear or confused? Do you feel more like yourself or less? These quiet emotional signals are giving you honest information that your rational mind sometimes wants to argue with or dismiss. Once you have identified the relationships that consistently cost you more than they contribute, the next question is what to do about them. And this is where many people get stuck, because the answer is rarely clean or simple. In a perfect world, you could simply remove every draining person from your life and replace them with people who inspire and elevate you. But the real world is more complicated. Some of the most draining relationships in your life involve people you cannot simply walk away from. Family members, co-workers, longtime friends you feel obligated to, people whose connection to you involves history, complexity, and genuine care alongside the difficulty. This is why the solution is not always distance. Sometimes the solution is boundaries. And understanding how to set and maintain real boundaries is one of the most practical and transformative skills you can develop as a human being. A boundary is not a wall. It is not a punishment. It is not an act of hostility. A boundary is simply a clear, honest definition of what you are and are not available for. It is the difference between being endlessly accessible to someone's emotional needs and choosing when, how, and in what context you engage. When you set a boundary, you are not telling someone that they are bad or that you do not care about them. You are telling them the terms under which you are able to show up as a healthy, present, genuinely engaged person. The reason most people struggle with setting boundaries is not that they do not understand the concept. It is that they are afraid of the reaction. They worry that the other person will be hurt, angry, or will pull away. They feel guilty for prioritizing their own well-being. They have been conditioned, often from a very young age, to believe that being a good person means being available to others without limit. That saying no is selfish. That putting your own needs first is a betrayal of the people who depend on you. But consider the alternative. When you have no boundaries, you gradually give away so much of yourself that there is nothing left. You become a hollow version of the person you are supposed to be. And a hollow person cannot truly be there for anyone. You cannot pour from an empty vessel no matter how willing you are or how much you care. Protecting your energy is not selfishness. It is the foundation upon which every meaningful contribution you make to others is built. Start practicing boundaries in low-stakes situations before you attempt them in the most challenging relationships in your life. Learn to say no to requests that genuinely conflict with your priorities without offering an elaborate justification. Learn to end conversations that have become circular, draining, or unproductive without feeling obligated to stay until the other person is satisfied. Learn to redirect conversations that are pulling you into gossip, negativity, or complaint by simply choosing not to engage with that thread. These small practices build the emotional muscle you will need when the harder boundary conversations become necessary. When you do need to set a more significant boundary with someone in your life, do it with clarity and without hostility. You do not need to deliver a speech. You do not need to catalogue all of the ways the relationship has cost you. Simply communicate what you need going forward in plain, direct terms. The simpler you keep it, the better. Long explanations invite debate. A clear, calm statement of your boundary does not. Some people will respect your boundary immediately. Others will test it repeatedly and creatively because your previous lack of boundaries trained them to expect unlimited access to your time and emotional resources. When this happens, your job is not to become angry or defensive. Your job is to hold the boundary calmly and consistently. Every time you hold it, you reinforce to both the other person and to yourself that your needs are real and that you are serious about honoring them. Every time you abandon it to avoid discomfort, you send the opposite message and the cycle begins again. There is another category of relationship that requires a different kind of response entirely. These are the relationships that are fundamentally incompatible with the direction your life is moving. People who were part of your past identity, the version of you that existed before you started growing intentionally, sometimes find your growth threatening. Not because they are bad people, but because your evolution implicitly challenges the choices they are not yet ready to examine in their own lives. When you stop complaining and start working, it disturbs the people around you who bond through shared complaint. When you stop drinking heavily, it creates discomfort in social circles where drinking is the primary connection. When you start taking your health, your finances, or your mindset seriously, it can create an invisible distance between you and people who have not yet chosen to do the same. This is one of the lonelier aspects of personal growth that almost nobody warns you about. The path forward sometimes requires you to walk away from people who were genuinely important to you at an earlier stage of your life, not with bitterness or judgment, but with the honest recognition that not every relationship is designed to last forever. Some relationships serve a season, some exist to teach you something specific, and some, despite the genuine affection and history they carry, are not built to survive the person you are in the process of becoming. Releasing these relationships is not a failure. It is a sign of growth. It takes courage to acknowledge when a connection that once nourished you has become something that holds you back. And it takes wisdom to let it go gracefully, without drama, and without destroying what was genuinely good about it, simply because it has reached its natural end. As you become more protective of your energy, you will naturally begin to attract different kinds of people into your life. This is not a mystical concept. It is a practical reality. When you change your habits, your environment, your standards, and your daily conversation, you create proximity to people who share those same values. The gym creates proximity to people who prioritize their physical health. The library creates proximity to people who invest in their minds. Professional development events create proximity to people who take their careers seriously. Quiet, focused working environments create proximity to people who value their time. You do not have to force this. Simply become the person you want to be. Live in the environments that support that person, and the relationships that align with that version of you will develop organically. You will find yourself having conversations that energize you instead of draining you. You will find yourself around people whose ambition activates your own instead of dimming it. You will notice that your social interactions start leaving you feeling inspired and motivated rather than hollow and heavy. Be equally honest about the energy you bring to others. It is easy to identify the people who drain you without examining whether you sometimes do the same to others. Growth requires this kind of unflinching self-honesty. If you find yourself regularly complaining, seeking constant reassurance, pulling others into your drama, or making interactions consistently about your needs without genuine interest in theirs, these are patterns worth addressing. Not because you should feel ashamed, but because becoming someone who adds to the people around them is part of what it means to grow into a more complete version of yourself. The goal is not to become someone who never needs anything from others. Human beings are built for genuine connection, and real relationships involve mutual support, vulnerability, and care in both directions. The goal is to build relationships that have healthy reciprocity, where both people give and receive, where both people grow, and where the presence of the other person makes both individuals better rather than smaller. Guard your energy with the same seriousness that you guard your time and your money. Treat it as the non-renewable resource that it is. Choose your company with intention. Set your boundaries with clarity. Release what no longer serves your growth without guilt. and invest your presence fully in the people and relationships that genuinely deserve it. Because who you spend your time with is quietly shaping who you are becoming. The conversations you have daily are setting the ceiling on your thinking. The attitudes of the people closest to you are influencing your own attitude in ways you may not even notice. And the energy you allow into your life is either fueling your growth or slowing it down. You have the right to choose. Exercise that right with wisdom, with compassion, and without apology. Your energy is yours. Protect it as though your future depends on it. In Visible and Invisible, it absolutely does. Chapter 5. Shift your focus inward and discover your purpose. There is a question that billions of people carry with them through their entire lives, without ever finding a satisfying answer. It shows up in quiet moments, in the middle of the night when sleep refuses to come, during long commutes, during celebrations that somehow feel hollow, during ordinary Tuesday afternoons when nothing is wrong and yet something feels deeply incomplete. The question is simply this: what am I actually here for? Most people never answer it, not because the answer does not exist, but because they never stop long enough to look for it in the right place. They look outward. They look at what other people are doing with their lives and try to want the same things. They follow paths laid out by their parents, their culture, their social circle, or the loudest voices in the room. They chase titles, income levels, relationship milestones, and social recognition, believing that once they reach each marker, the sense of purpose they are searching for will finally arrive. And when it does not, they simply set a new marker further ahead and keep running. This cycle can continue for decades. And the saddest part is not that people chase the wrong things. The saddest part is that many of them sense, somewhere deep down, that something is misaligned. They feel it as a low-grade restlessness that no achievement seems to cure. They feel it as a quiet voice that suggests, even in moments of external success, that this is not quite it. But instead of listening to that voice, they drown it out with more activity, more noise, more distraction, and more pursuit of things they were told should make them feel fulfilled. Purpose cannot be found by looking outward. It can only be discovered by turning your attention inward. And that inward turn is precisely what most people spend their lives avoiding. The reason people avoid looking inward is not laziness. It is fear. When you genuinely look inside yourself, you encounter things that are uncomfortable. You find fears you have been running from. You find beliefs about yourself that are limiting and painful. You find grief over paths not taken and versions of yourself that were abandoned to meet someone else's expectations. You find desires that feel embarrassing or impractical next to the life you have been building. Looking inward requires a kind of courage that is different from physical bravery. It is the courage to see yourself clearly and honestly, without the filters of who you are supposed to be. But on the other side of that discomfort is something extraordinary. On the other side is a clarity about who you are, what you value, and what kind of life would make you feel genuinely alive rather than simply busy. That clarity is what purpose feels like when you find it, and it changes everything. Understanding what purpose actually is will save you enormous confusion and wasted effort. Purpose is not a single dramatic calling that arrives in a lightning bolt moment of divine revelation. It is not a job title or a grand mission statement. It is not something that only artists, activists, and spiritual leaders get to have, while ordinary people are left without one. Purpose is far more personal and far more accessible than popular culture suggests. At its core, purpose is the intersection of what you genuinely care about, what you are naturally drawn to develop, and how you want to contribute to the world around you. It is less about what you do, and more about why you do it, and how fully you bring yourself to it. This means that purpose is available to every single person regardless of their circumstances, background, education, or stage of life. A parent raising children with intention and love is living with purpose. A craftsperson who brings genuine care and skill to their work is living with purpose. A teacher who truly invests in the development of young minds is living with purpose. A person who is simply committed to becoming more honest, more kind, and more self-aware than they were yesterday is living with purpose. The size of the platform is irrelevant. The depth of the commitment is everything. The practical journey inward begins with honest self-examination. Not the kind of self-reflection that is really just self-criticism dressed up in thoughtful language, where you run through your flaws and failures under the pretense of self-awareness. Genuine self-examination is curious rather than judgmental. It asks questions without demanding immediate answers. It creates space for things to surface rather than forcing conclusions. Start by asking yourself questions that most people never sit with long enough to answer honestly. What activities make you lose track of time? Not what you think should engage you deeply, but what actually does. What topics could you read about, talk about, or work on for hours without feeling depleted? When do you feel most like yourself? Not most impressive or most successful, but most genuinely you. What would you pursue if you knew that no one would judge you for it and that financial security was guaranteed? What kind of contribution to others leaves you feeling the most satisfied? Not the kind that earns the most praise, but the kind that feels most meaningful when you lie down at night. These questions do not yield their answers in a single sitting. They require you to return to them repeatedly, to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, and to resist the temptation to give the answers you think sound good, rather than the ones that are actually true. Keep a journal specifically for this kind of exploration. Write without editing. Write without showing anyone. Let the words come out raw and unfiltered, because the filtered version is just your performed self, and your performed self already knows how to give socially acceptable answers. What you are looking for is what lives beneath that. Pay attention to what genuinely moves you emotionally. The things that consistently stir something deep inside you, whether it is anger at injustice, excitement about a particular field of knowledge, deep compassion for a specific kind of suffering, or pure joy in a particular kind of creative or physical experience. These emotional responses are not random. They are signals pointing toward what matters to you at a level that goes beyond preference or habit. When something consistently moves you, it is worth asking why, and then asking why again, and then asking why a third time. Because the deeper you go into that chain of questioning, the closer you get to something that is genuinely yours. One of the most important internal shifts you can make is separating your identity from external roles and achievements. Most people, when asked who they are, describe what they do. They are a teacher, a parent, a manager, an athlete, a business owner. These roles are real and meaningful, but they are not the full truth of who you are. Roles are things you perform. Identity is something deeper, and when you over-identify with your roles, you become vulnerable to an existential crisis every time a role changes, ends, or fails to deliver the sense of self it once provided. Who are you when you strip away your job title? Who are you when you are not performing any role for anyone? What values do you hold that would remain constant, regardless of your circumstances? What kind of person do you genuinely want to be, not in terms of achievements or status, but in terms of character? These questions cut to the core of identity in a way that most people find deeply unsettling, because they reveal how much of what we call identity is actually borrowed from external sources rather than developed from within. Building a genuine inner identity is a process that takes time and deliberate attention. It involves deciding consciously what you value and then choosing every day to act in alignment with those values, whether or not the world rewards you for it. It involves developing a relationship with yourself that is characterized by honesty, self-respect, and genuine curiosity about your own nature. It involves learning to trust your own judgment and your own instincts rather than constantly outsourcing your sense of self to other people's opinions. As your inner identity becomes clearer and stronger, something remarkable happens to your sense of purpose. It stops feeling like something you need to find, and starts feeling like something you are actively living. Because purpose is not a destination you arrive at. It is a direction you orient yourself toward and then walk in consistently. Every day that you act from your genuine values, every day that you develop your real strengths, every day that you contribute in ways that feel authentically meaningful to you, you are living your purpose, even if no one recognizes it, even if it looks nothing like what you imagined. The noise of comparison is one of the greatest enemies of inward focus. In an age where everyone's highlight reel is permanently on display, it is almost impossible to look inward without being constantly interrupted by The sight of other people's lives. Someone your age is already running a successful company. Some from your hometown is traveling the world. Someone who started with far fewer advantages than you has somehow achieved far more visible success. And every time you see this, the voice in your head starts questioning whether your path is fast enough, impressive enough, or worthy enough. Comparison is the death of purpose because it forces you to evaluate your life by someone else's standards. And the moment you start measuring yourself against another person's journey, you lose contact with the only compass that actually knows your destination, which is the one inside you. No two people are walking the same path. No two people carry the same combination of experiences, wounds, strengths, and desires. What looks like success from the outside of someone else's life may be completely misaligned with what you genuinely need to feel fulfilled. And what looks like a slow, quiet, unimpressive journey from the outside may be exactly the right pace for the depth of growth you are undergoing. Stop looking at where other people are. Look at where you are relative to where you were. That is the only comparison that gives you useful information. That is the only measurement that honors the specific nature of your journey. There is a concept in Japanese philosophy called ikigai, which roughly translates to a reason for being. It is found at the convergence of four elements: what you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what you can be recognized or compensated for in some form. The beauty of this framework is not the precision of its categories, but the invitation it extends to look honestly at all four dimensions of your life and ask where they genuinely overlap, because when you find that overlap, even partially, you have found a direction that is sustainable, meaningful, and personally authentic. Most people focus exclusively on the fourth element, what they can be paid for, because financial pressure is immediate and real. But a life built only around income, with no attention to what you love, what you are genuinely good at, or what contribution feels meaningful, is a life that will always feel like something important is missing. The goal is not to abandon practical reality, but to expand your definition of what is possible so that your work and your purpose begin to converge rather than pulling in opposite directions. This convergence rarely happens all at once. It is a process of gradual alignment that unfolds as you become more honest with yourself, more willing to experiment, and more courageous about moving toward what genuinely calls you, even when it is not the safest or most obvious choice. It requires patience. It requires the willingness to sit with uncertainty, while trusting that clarity is developing beneath the surface even when you cannot yet see it. Give yourself permission to not have everything figured out right now. Purpose does not demand immediate certainty. It demands genuine engagement with the process of self-discovery. It demands that you keep showing up for the inward journey even when it feels slow, uncomfortable, or inconclusive. Because every honest question you ask yourself, every journal entry you write without editing, every quiet moment you spend actually listening to what is happening inside you instead of drowning it out, is a step toward the clarity you are seeking. The world is very good at telling you who to be. It is very good at pointing you toward predefined paths and measuring your worth by predefined standards. But no external source, no matter how wise or well-intentioned, can tell you what your specific life is for. That knowledge lives inside you. It always has. The only thing standing between you and it is the willingness to turn your attention away from the noise of the world and toward the quiet truth, your own experience. Turn inward. Stay there long enough to hear what is waiting for you, and then have the courage to build your life around what you find. Chapter 6. Discipline yourself daily and watch your life change. Every person who has ever built something genuinely worthwhile, whether it was a strong body, a successful business, a deep skill, a lasting marriage, or an unshakable mind, built it the same way. Not through talent alone, not through luck or timing or being born into the right circumstances. They built it through discipline, through the daily, unglamorous, often thankless practice of doing what needed to be done, regardless of how they felt about doing it on any particular day. Discipline is the most misunderstood word in the vocabulary of personal growth. Most people hear it and picture something harsh and joyless. They picture rigid schedules, cold showers, military-style routines, and a life stripped of pleasure in pursuit of productivity. They associate it with punishment, with deprivation, with the suppression of everything spontaneous and human. And because of that association, they resist it. They tell themselves they are not the disciplined type. They celebrate their own spontaneity as though the inability to follow through on their commitments is actually a personality trait worth keeping. But genuine discipline has nothing to do with harshness or deprivation. At its deepest level, discipline is an act of self-respect. It is the decision to honor your future self as much as you honor your present comfort. It is the recognition that the choices you make when you do not feel motivated have far more impact on your life than the choices you make when inspiration is running high. It is the understanding that freedom, real freedom, is not the absence of structure, but the result of it. The musician who practices for years earns the freedom to play anything. The athlete who trains through discomfort earns the freedom to perform under pressure. The person who manages their finances with discipline earns the freedom to make choices without financial fear. Structure and discipline do not cage you. They create the conditions under which genuine freedom becomes possible. The reason discipline feels so difficult for most people is that they are trying to apply it in the wrong order. They wait until they feel motivated to act, and then they expect discipline to naturally follow. But motivation is an emotion, and emotions are unreliable, inconsistent, and deeply responsive to circumstances that have nothing to do with your goals. You will not feel motivated every morning. You will not wake up every day with fire in your chest and clarity in your mind. Some mornings you will feel tired, doubtful, overwhelmed, or simply indifferent. And on those mornings, motivation will not show up to save you. Discipline is what shows up instead. Discipline says that whether you feel like it or not, you do the thing you committed to doing because you made an agreement with yourself, and that agreement matters more than your momentary emotional state. Every time you honor that agreement despite resistance, you build something invisible but profoundly real. You build trust in yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of every form of genuine confidence that exists. Most people confuse confidence with a feeling. They think confident people simply feel bold and certain all the time. But the people who carry the deepest confidence are not the ones who never feel doubt. They are the ones who have shown themselves, through repeated action, that they can be counted on. They know from direct personal experience that when they set their mind to something, they follow through. That knowledge is not a feeling. It is evidence. And evidence is far more durable than any feeling could ever be. Every morning that you get up when you plan to get up, every workout you complete when your body wants to stay still, every page you write when the words are not flowing easily, every difficult conversation you have instead of avoiding, every hour you spend on important work instead of disappearing into distraction, you are depositing evidence into an internal account that tells you who you are. Over time, that account grows into an unshakable sense of personal reliability that changes how you approach every challenge in your life. The practical starting point for building daily discipline is deceptively simple. You must begin by defining what your disciplined day actually looks like. Most people have a vague sense that they should be more disciplined without ever clearly defining what that means in specific, concrete behavioral terms. Discipline toward what exactly? Toward waking up at a specific time, toward completing a specific amount of work, toward avoiding specific behaviors that undermine your health or your focus. You cannot practice discipline in the abstract. You need a clear target. Sit down and design what your ideal discipline day looks like from start to finish. Not a fantasy day where everything goes perfectly and you have unlimited energy and zero interruptions. A realistic day that represents a genuine improvement over how you currently operate. What time do you wake up? What do you do in the first hour? What are the non-negotiable tasks you complete before anything else takes your attention? When do you exercise? When do you disconnect from screens? What time do you stop working? When do you prepare for the following day? Write this out in specific detail. Then commit to living that design for 30 consecutive days, not 30 perfect days. 30 days of genuine effort, where missing one element does not become permission to abandon everything else. This 30-day experiment will teach you more about your own patterns, your own resistances, and your own capacity for self-direction than any book or course ever could. One of the most powerful principles of daily discipline is what many high performers call the non-negotiable. A non-negotiable is a behavior so fundamental to your well-being and your growth that it is simply not subject to negotiation on any given day. It does not matter how busy you are. It does not matter how tired you feel. It does not matter what unexpected events have disrupted your schedule. The non-negotiable happens. Period. Your non-negotiables should be the small number of daily behaviors that you know from experience have the greatest impact on how you function. For most people, these include sleep, physical movement, and some form of mental clarity practice. For others, they include specific creative work, time in nature, or a particular spiritual or reflective practice. The exact content matters less than the commitment. When you have true non-negotiables, you stop negotiating with yourself about whether to do them. And the absence of that negotiation removes an enormous amount of daily mental friction. Every time you negotiate with yourself about whether to do something you already decided was important, you lose energy regardless of which side of the negotiation wins. If you talk yourself into doing it, you arrive at the behavior already slightly depleted from the internal argument. If you talk yourself out of it, you carry the quiet weight of self-betrayal for the rest of the day. Eliminating the negotiation entirely by simply deciding in advance that certain things are non-negotiable preserves your mental energy for the actual work. Another dimension of daily discipline that most people overlook is the discipline of what you choose not to do. Saying yes to every request, every distraction, every social obligation, and every opportunity that comes your way is not generosity or openness. It is a lack of boundaries around your time and attention that guarantees you will never have enough of either for what truly matters. Real discipline includes the regular practice of saying no to things that do not align with your priorities, even when those things are pleasant, even when saying no disappoints people, and even when the path of least resistance would be to simply agree. Every yes you give to something that does not serve your growth is a no to something that does. Your time is not infinite. Your attention is not unlimited. And every hour spent on something that does not move you forward is an hour that will not be available for the work that defines your future. Disciplined people are not disciplined only in what they do. They are disciplined in what they refuse. The relationship between discipline and emotion is one of the most important things to understand if you want to build a sustainable practice. There will be days when discipline feels inspiring, when you wake up clear-headed and focused and the work flows easily and you end the day feeling genuinely proud of what you accomplished. These days are wonderful, but they are not the days that define you. The days that define you are the difficult ones, the days when everything feels heavy and slow, when the work feels pointless, when progress seems impossible, and the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels humiliating rather than motivating. The days when every cell in your body is voting for comfort and rest, and the abandonment of the whole project. What you do on those days is the truest measure of your discipline, and what you do on those days is what separates the people who actually transform their lives from the people who perpetually intend to. On those difficult days, do not try to feel motivated. Do not wait for the feeling to change before you begin. Instead, reduce the task to its absolute minimum and simply begin. Not the full workout, the first 5 minutes of movement. Not the complete chapter, the first paragraph. Not the entire project, the next single step. Beginning is the hardest part. Once you are in motion, continuation is always easier than the initial start. And sometimes once you begin, you discover that you had more capacity than you thought. The resistance was in the anticipation, not in the doing. Developing discipline also requires an honest examination of the environments and patterns that consistently undermine it. If you keep your phone on your desk during work hours, you will check it constantly regardless of your intentions. If you keep certain foods in your home, you will eat them when your willpower is low. If you stay up late consuming content that stimulates your nervous system, you will struggle to wake up early the next morning. These are not personal failures. They are entirely predictable outcomes of environments that were not designed with your goals in mind. The disciplined response is not to berate yourself for these predictable human behaviors, but to redesign the environment so that the behaviors you want become easier and the behaviors you are trying to reduce become harder. Turn your phone off and put it in another room during focused work. Remove the foods that derail your nutrition from your immediate environment. Set a hard stop on screen time an hour before you want to sleep. Design your physical space to support your best self rather than your most impulsive one. Self-compassion and discipline are not opposites. They are partners. Many people believe that being hard on themselves is what drives discipline, that self-criticism, shame, and harsh internal judgment are the fuel that keeps them moving. But research and lived experience consistently show the opposite. People who practice genuine self-compassion, who treat their mistakes as information rather than evidence of fundamental inadequacy, who speak to themselves with the same patience they would offer a person they care about, are more likely to persist after setbacks, more likely to try again after failure, and more likely to maintain long-term commitment to their goals. Harsh self-judgment creates shame. Shame creates avoidance, and avoidance is the enemy of discipline. When you miss a day and respond by telling yourself that you are hopeless and undisciplined and will never change, you make it significantly harder to return the next day. But when you miss a day and respond by acknowledging it without drama, examining what happened with honest curiosity, and recommitting to your next opportunity without self-punishment, you preserve the psychological safety that makes consistent effort possible. Treat yourself as you would treat a student you genuinely believed in, with high standards and real accountability, but also with patience, understanding, and the unshakable belief that improvement is always possible given enough time and honest effort. The changes that daily discipline produces are not always visible in the short term. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of committing to a disciplined life in a culture that is addicted to immediate results. The financial discipline you practice today will not make you wealthy by next month. The physical training you commit to today will not transform your body by next week. The mental practices you develop today will not make you a completely different thinker by next Tuesday. Change at this depth operates on a different timeline than the one our impatient minds prefer, but compound it. Practice daily discipline for 6 months, for a year, for 5 years, and the transformation that accumulates becomes genuinely difficult to recognize from the outside. People who knew you before will comment on how different you seem. Challenges that once paralyzed you will feel manageable. Goals that once seemed impossibly distant will become your current reality. Skills that once felt beyond your reach will become natural expressions of who you are. This is what discipline does over time. It does not just change what you do. It changes who you are. It rewires your identity from someone who struggles to follow through into someone who simply does what they said they would do. And when that becomes your identity, your entire life begins to move in a different direction. You do not need to be extraordinary to live with discipline. You do not need special genes, perfect circumstances, or a naturally strong character. You need only the decision, made sincerely and renewed every single morning, to be a person who shows up for themselves, a person who honors their commitments, a person who does the work even when the work is hard, a person who trusts the process even when the results are not yet visible. Make that decision today, renew it tomorrow, and watch, over the months and years ahead, as everything in your life begins to reflect the person that daily discipline is quietly and steadily building you. Into Chapter 7, release the need for approval and find true freedom. There is a prison that has no walls, no bars, and no locked doors. You cannot see it from the outside. Nobody put you in it by force. And yet millions of people spend their entire lives inside it, making decisions based on its invisible constraints, shrinking themselves to fit within its boundaries, and sacrificing their most authentic desires on the altar of what other people might think. This prison is the need for approval. And the most painful part is that you built it yourself. One small compromise at a time, usually beginning so early in childhood that you cannot even remember when the construction started. The need for approval is one of the oldest and most deeply wired human drives. As children, approval from caregivers was not just emotionally desirable, it was functionally necessary. A child who receives approval feels safe, loved, and secure. A child who receives disapproval feels threatened at a very primal level. So we learned early and effectively to monitor the reactions of the people around us and to adjust our behavior accordingly. We learned which parts of ourselves were welcomed and which parts made others uncomfortable. We learned to perform the version of ourselves that generated the most positive response from the people whose approval kept us safe. The problem is that most people never outgrow this childhood survival strategy. They carry it into adulthood, into their careers, their relationships, their creative work, and their most personal decisions. They are still, decades later, making choices based on what will generate approval from an audience that has changed completely from the original one. They are still editing themselves, hiding parts of their true nature, and living smaller than they are capable of, because somewhere, deep in their nervous system, disapproval still registers as danger. Recognizing this pattern in yourself is not a reason for shame. It is a reason for genuine compassion. The part of you that seeks approval was trying to protect you. It did what it needed to do to help you navigate environments where your sense of safety depended on other people's responses. But you are not a child anymore. Your safety is no longer contingent on everyone around you being pleased with your choices. And the strategy that once protected you is now the thing standing most directly between you and the life you actually want. Consider how many decisions in your daily life are influenced, consciously or unconsciously, by the question of what other people will think. The career path you chose or avoided, the opinions you express or withhold in conversations, the clothes you wear, the goals you pursue openly versus the ones you keep secret because they feel too vulnerable to share. The relationships you stay in past their natural end because leaving would invite judgment. The creative work you never start because the thought of being criticized feels unbearable. The version of yourself you present on social media versus the one that actually exists when no one is watching. When you add all of this up honestly, you begin to see how much of your life has been authored by the imagined opinions of other people rather than by your own genuine desires and values. You begin to see how much creative energy, personal authenticity, and genuine joy has been sacrificed to maintain an image that was never truly yours to begin with. And that recognition, as uncomfortable as it is the beginning of real freedom. True freedom is not the absence of responsibility or consequence. It is the ability to make your choices based on your own genuine values rather than on the fear of other people's reactions. It is the experience of moving through your life as the primary author of your own story rather than as a performer constantly adjusting the script based on audience feedback. It is the deep, settled feeling of being fully yourself, regardless of who is watching and regardless of whether they approve. That kind of freedom is available to you, but reaching it requires a process of deliberate inner work that most people find deeply uncomfortable, precisely because it involves sitting with disapproval and discovering, perhaps for the first time, that you can survive it. The first layer of this work is understanding the difference between approval-seeking and genuine consideration for others. These two things are often confused, and the confusion leads some people to believe that releasing the need for approval means becoming indifferent to the impact of their behavior on the people around them. This is not what it means at all. Caring about how your actions affect others is a sign of maturity and empathy. Adjusting your behavior to avoid causing unnecessary harm is a healthy social value. But there is a fundamental difference between choosing your actions thoughtfully because you genuinely care about others and choosing your actions fearfully because you cannot tolerate the possibility of their disapproval. The first is driven by love and values. The second is driven by fear and insecurity, and only you can determine honestly which one is operating in any given situation. When you make a decision, ask yourself this question with complete honesty. Am I doing this because it aligns with my genuine values and because it is genuinely good for the people involved? Or am I doing this because I am afraid of what will happen if I do not? The answer to that question will tell you more about where you are operating from than any amount of external analysis. The second layer of this work is developing what philosophers and psychologists alike have described as an internal locus of control. This is the experience of feeling that your sense of worth, your emotional stability, and your sense of direction come primarily from within, rather than from the reactions of the people around you. People with a strong internal locus of control are not immune to criticism or indifferent to connection. They enjoy positive feedback and feel the sting of disapproval like everyone else. But their fundamental sense of themselves does not rise and fall with the opinions of others. They have a stable inner foundation that remains intact even when the external world is not validating them. Building this internal foundation requires you to become your own most reliable source of honest evaluation. This means developing the practice of regularly assessing your own behavior, your own work, and your own choices against your own standards, rather than constantly measuring them against other people's reactions. After completing a piece of work, before checking what anyone else thinks of it, ask yourself honestly whether you gave it your genuine best effort, whether it reflects your real values, whether you are proud of it by your own measure. Let your self-assessment be the first and most important feedback you receive. Let other people's reactions be additional information rather than the primary verdict. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is the refusal to consider any perspective other than your own. What you are building is something different. You are building the capacity to hold your own judgment as genuinely valid and genuinely yours, while remaining open to learning and growth through honest feedback from people whose perspective you respect. The key distinction is that you choose whose feedback you actually weigh carefully, rather than being equally destabilized by every opinion that comes your way. Not everyone's opinion deserves equal consideration. This is a truth that approval seekers find deeply uncomfortable, because the approval-seeking mindset operates on the premise that everyone's opinion matters equally, and that everyone must be kept satisfied. But think carefully about this. Would you take medical advice from someone who has never studied medicine? Would you accept financial guidance from someone with a history of poor financial decisions? Of course not. You would seek the opinion of someone with relevant knowledge and genuine experience. Yet when it comes to opinions about your life, your character, and your choices, most people accept criticism from virtually anyone, including people who know nothing about their circumstances, who have no particular wisdom to offer, and who may have their own unexamined motivations for wanting to keep others small. Decide consciously whose perspective actually deserves significant weight in your life. These should be people who know you well, who have demonstrated genuine care for your well-being, who have earned credibility through their own experience and wisdom, and who are capable of giving honest feedback without cruelty. A small circle of genuinely trustworthy people whose thoughtful input you actively seek is infinitely more valuable than the constant stream of casual opinions from acquaintances, strangers, and people whose approval you have been chasing without ever consciously choosing to. Social media has made the need for approval infinitely more complicated and infinitely more damaging than it was for previous generations. For most of human history, the audience whose approval you might seek was limited to people in your immediate social environment. Today, any post, any opinion, any creative work you share is immediately exposed to hundreds or thousands of reactions from people you barely know. And the platforms that host this exposure are specifically designed to make you feel the emotional impact of those reactions as intensely as possible. Every like, every comment, every share triggers a small dopamine response. Every absence of engagement triggers a small experience of social rejection. And when you are exposed to this cycle dozens of times per day, your brain begins to organize an increasing amount of its activity around generating the behaviors that produce positive responses. This is not a character flaw. It is a design outcome. The platforms were built to produce exactly this response because your engagement is their product. But understanding this does not make it harmless. When your sense of worth becomes entangled with the performance metrics of social media, you stop creating from genuine expression and start creating for reaction. You stop sharing your real thoughts and start sharing the thoughts most likely to generate approval. You stop living your actual life and start curating a version of it that plays well to an audience. And in doing so, you lose contact with the authentic experience of being yourself. The practice of releasing approval seeking in the digital space begins with using these platforms more intentionally and less reflexively. Post when you have something genuinely meaningful to share, rather than to fill a silence or generate engagement. Resist the urge to check reactions immediately after posting. Create content that you would be proud of regardless of how many people respond to it. And periodically take extended breaks from social media entirely so that your brain can recalibrate its reward system away from external validation and back toward genuine internal satisfaction. One of the most liberating realizations available to a human being is the recognition that most people are far too occupied with their own insecurities, their own fears, and their own lives to spend significant time thinking critically about yours. The imagined audience of judgmental observers that approval-seeking creates in your mind is largely a fiction. People notice you far less than you think. They judge you far less than you fear. And even when they do form opinions about you, those opinions are almost always more about their own projections and preoccupations than about any objective truth about who you are. This does not mean that you are invisible or that your choices have no impact on how others perceive you. It means that the mental energy you invest in managing other people's perceptions is almost always wildly disproportionate to the actual threat those perceptions represent. You are spending enormous amounts of your most precious cognitive and emotional resources defending yourself against a danger that is largely imaginary. And while you are defending, you are not building. While you are performing, you are not growing. While you are seeking approval, you are not becoming. The moment you genuinely internalize this, something shifts. The opinions of people who do not know you deeply, who have not earned the right to significant weight in your inner life, begin to lose their grip. Not because you have forced yourself to stop caring, but because you have clearly seen that they were never the reliable measure of your worth that your nervous system had been treating them as. Learning to sit with disapproval without being destroyed by it is a skill that develops through practice. Start small. Express an honest opinion in a low-stakes conversation and let the chips fall. Make a decision that you know some people will question without rushing to explain or defend it. Create something from your genuine perspective and share it without obsessively monitoring the response. Each time you do this and discover that you survived, that the disapproval was tolerable, that you are still intact and still yourself on the other side of it, you build evidence that the threat was manageable. And that evidence accumulates into a new kind of courage. The deepest form of this freedom comes when you are finally able to disappoint people without feeling that you have done something fundamentally wrong. Disappointing people is an inevitable consequence of living authentically. You cannot say yes to your own life without sometimes saying no to what others want from you. You cannot honor your own values without occasionally conflicting with someone else's expectations. You cannot grow into a fuller version of yourself without outgrowing certain relationships, certain roles, and certain versions of who you have been performing for other people's comfort. When you are willing to be a disappointment to someone rather than a betrayal to yourself, you have found your freedom. Not the shallow freedom of doing whatever you want without consideration for anyone else, but the deep, earned, durable freedom of a person who knows who they are, lives according to what they genuinely value, and no longer needs the world's permission to do so. That freedom is not given to you by anyone. It is claimed by you through the daily practice of choosing yourself honestly, choosing your values over your fears, and trusting that the life built on genuine authenticity will always be more fulfilling than the one built on universal approval. It will not always be comfortable, it will not always be understood, but it will be yours. Completely, undeniably, and finally yours. Chapter 8. Strengthen your mind against doubt, fear, and distraction. The battlefield that determines the entire quality of your life is not found in your circumstances, your bank account, your relationships, or your career. It exists entirely between your ears. Every victory you will ever experience and every defeat you will ever suffer begins as a mental event before it becomes a physical reality. The person who learns to govern this inner battlefield, who develops the capacity to face doubt without collapsing, to feel fear without retreating, and to encounter distraction without surrendering their focus, That person becomes genuinely unstoppable in a way that has nothing to do with talent or privilege or perfect conditions. Most people never develop this capacity because they misunderstand the nature of doubt, fear, and distraction. They believe these experiences are signs that something is wrong with them. They believe that mentally strong people simply do not feel these things, that successful people wake up each morning with unshakable certainty and iron focus, untouched by the insecurities and interruptions that plague ordinary minds. This belief is not just false, it is actively harmful because it causes people to interpret their perfectly normal human experience as evidence of inadequacy, which then generates more doubt, more fear, and more distraction in a self-reinforcing cycle that can last for years. The truth is that every person who has ever done anything meaningful has done it while carrying doubt. Every person who has ever built something significant has built it while feeling fear at various stages of the process. Every person who has ever sustained deep focus has had to fight for that focus against a constant tide of potential distraction. Mental strength is not the absence of these experiences. It is the developed capacity to continue moving forward in their presence. It is the ability to feel doubt and act anyway, to feel fear and advance regardless, to encounter distraction and repeatedly return to what matters most. Begin with doubt, because doubt is often the first opponent you face when you decide to pursue something meaningful. Doubt speaks in the first person. It uses your voice. It says things like, "I am not ready, I am not qualified, I am not talented enough, I have tried before and failed. Other people can do this, but I am different. This is too hard for someone like me." Because it sounds like you, it is easy to mistake it for honest self-assessment. But there is a critical difference between genuine self-assessment and the voice of doubt. Genuine self-assessment is specific, actionable, and oriented toward growth. It says something like, "I do not yet have the skill to do this at the level I want, and here is what I can do to develop it." It identifies real gaps and points toward real solutions. Doubt, on the other hand, is general, paralyzing, and oriented toward retreat. It does not identify specific deficiencies with constructive solutions. It simply generates a pervasive sense of inadequacy designed to keep you from trying. Learning to distinguish between these two voices is a skill that transforms your relationship with uncertainty. When you hear an internal voice questioning your readiness or your capability, pause and ask it to be specific. What exactly am I not ready for? What specific skill or knowledge do I lack? What concrete evidence exists for this assessment? When you demand specificity from doubt, one of two things happens. Either it produces a genuine answer that gives you something real to work on, in which case it was actually useful self-assessment dressed in doubt's clothing, or it cannot produce specifics, because it was never based on anything real. And a doubt that cannot survive a single honest question does not deserve to govern your behavior. The other powerful response to doubt is action. Not massive, perfectly planned action, but immediate, imperfect forward action. Doubt thrives in stillness. It grows strongest when you are sitting with your thoughts, giving it time and space to elaborate and expand. The moment you move, the moment you start doing the thing that doubt was trying to prevent, doubt begins to lose its grip. Action produces information. Information replaces speculation. And the more direct experience you accumulate through doing, the less power the theoretical arguments of doubt can hold over you. Fear operates differently from doubt, though the two are close companions. Doubt questions your capability. Fear questions your safety. And while the fears that most people face in modern life are rarely about physical survival, the nervous system experiences them with the same intensity as though they were. The fear of failure feels physically similar to the fear of a physical threat. The fear of rejection activates the same neural pathways as the fear of genuine danger. This is why intellectual arguments alone rarely dissolve fear. You cannot simply think your way out of a fear response, because fear operates below the level of rational thought. What you can do is change your relationship with fear through a practice of deliberate, graduated exposure. Fear diminishes in proportion to your direct experience with the thing you are afraid of. The person who is afraid of public speaking does not overcome that fear by reading about public speaking or by convincing themselves intellectually that it is not dangerous. They overcome it by speaking, repeatedly, in progressively more challenging contexts, until their nervous system accumulates enough evidence that the experience is survivable and manageable. This principle applies to every fear that is limiting your growth. The fear of starting a business diminishes when you take the first concrete step towards starting one and survive it. The fear of difficult conversations diminishes when you have one honest conversation and discover that the relationship did not collapse as you imagined it would. The fear of being truly seen diminishes when you express something genuine about yourself and experience connection rather than rejection as the response. You do not need to eliminate fear before you act. You need only to act despite it, repeatedly and consistently, until your accumulated experience restructures the threat assessment your nervous system has been running. Each act of courage in the presence of fear does not just move you forward externally. It rewires you internally, building a nervous system that is gradually less reactive and a mind that is progressively more capable of choosing behavior over instinct. There is a specific form of fear worth addressing directly because it is perhaps the most universally limiting one. It is the fear of being wrong. The fear of making the wrong decision, choosing the wrong path, investing in the wrong thing, and discovering at some point in the future that you should have done something differently. This fear keeps enormous numbers of people in permanent states of analysis paralysis, gathering more information, considering more options, waiting for a certainty that never arrives, while their actual life passes by unlived. The antidote to this fear is a fundamental reframe of what being wrong actually means. In the mental model that generates this fear, being wrong is a catastrophe. It means you are foolish, inadequate, and deserving of judgment. In the mental model that liberates you from it, being wrong is simply data. It is information that updates your understanding and improves your next decision. Every person who has ever made consistently good decisions over the long term has done so by making many imperfect decisions along the way and learning from each one. The goal is not to never be wrong. The goal is to be wrong quickly, learn thoroughly, and adjust intelligently. Now turn to distraction, which is perhaps the most prevalent and underestimated threat to mental strength in contemporary life. Unlike doubt and fear, which are internal phenomena, distraction has both internal and external dimensions. The internal dimension is the restless, discomfort-avoiding part of your mind that constantly seeks novelty and stimulation. The external dimension is the environment that has been specifically engineered by some of the most sophisticated technology companies in the world to exploit that internal restlessness as aggressively as possible. The result is a population whose capacity for sustained, deep focus is in serious decline. Most people today cannot sit with a single task or a single thought for more than a few minutes before their attention fragments. They have been conditioned by years of constant digital stimulation to expect immediate novelty and to experience mild discomfort, boredom, or difficulty as signals to seek distraction rather than signals to deepen engagement. This matters enormously because deep focus is where all the most important work happens. The insights that change how you see a problem, the creative connections that produce genuinely original ideas, the thorough understanding of complex material, the emotional processing of difficult experiences, the development of real skill in any domain. None of these happen in fragmented, distracted, surface-level attention. They happen in sustained, uninterrupted engagement that most people are no longer comfortable enough with discomfort to maintain. Rebuilding your capacity for deep focus is one of the most valuable investments you can make in your mental capabilities. Begin by deliberately practicing single tasking. Choose one task and give it your complete, undivided attention for a fixed period of time with all potential sources of interruption removed or disabled. Start with 25 minutes if that feels manageable. Extend gradually as your capacity grows. When your attention wanders, which it will, gently return it to the task without frustration. Each return is not a failure. It is a repetition in the practice of focus, equivalent to a repetition in physical training. Over time, your tolerance for sustained engagement will increase. You will find that you can work deeply for longer periods with less internal resistance. You will also discover something that many chronically distracted people have forgotten. There is a particular satisfaction available in genuine deep work that no amount of fragmented, distracted busyness can replicate. The satisfaction of finishing something that required real concentration. The sense of having truly used your mind rather than merely entertained it. Protecting your mental environment from the most aggressive sources of distraction is not optional if you are serious about building mental strength. Specific design choices about how you use your devices, when you check notifications, how you structure your physical workspace, and what you allow to claim your attention in the first place will determine whether your attention serves your goals or serves someone else's. Business model. Turn off notifications that do not serve your priorities. Create physical spaces dedicated to focused work. Establish time windows for checking communication platforms rather than leaving them open and accessible all day. These are not minor lifestyle preferences. They are decisions about who controls the most important resource you have. There is also an internal practice that strengthens the mind against all three of these adversaries simultaneously. It is the practice of regularly placing yourself in voluntary discomfort. Not suffering for its own sake, but deliberately choosing experiences that are harder, less comfortable, and less immediately gratifying than the path of least resistance would offer. Cold water in the morning. A physically demanding workout when your body wants rest. A difficult conversation you have been postponing. Extended periods of silence and solitude without digital stimulation. Fasting from food or entertainment for defined periods. Each of these practices works on the same underlying mechanism. They teach your nervous system that discomfort is not an emergency. They demonstrate to your mind, through direct experience, that you are capable of tolerating difficulty without collapsing or escaping. And a mind that knows it can handle discomfort is a mind that doubt cannot easily paralyze, that fear cannot easily reroute, and that distraction cannot easily seduce. The Stoic philosophers called this practice premeditation of adversity. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself of the difficulties and losses he might face, not to generate anxiety about them, but to reduce their power over him through familiarity. When you have already mentally and physically rehearsed handling difficulty, actual difficulty loses its capacity to destabilize you. You meet it not as a stranger, but as something you have already faced and survived. Your mind is not fixed. This is perhaps the most important truth in this entire chapter. The mental capacities you have right now, your current levels of confidence, focus, courage, and resilience are not permanent features of your character. They are the current state of a system that is entirely capable of development. The neuroscience is unambiguous on this point. The brain retains plasticity throughout life. The patterns of thought and response that currently define you were formed through experience and reinforcement, and new patterns can be formed the same way. Every time you face doubt and act anyway, you reinforce a new neural pattern. Every time you feel fear and move toward it rather than away from it, you build a more courageous nervous system. Every time you choose focused engagement over distraction, you strengthen the neural networks associated with sustained attention. You are not just doing the work. You are becoming the kind of person for whom this work is natural. Build your mind the way a serious athlete builds their body. With consistency, with progressive challenge, with recovery and reflection, and with the patient understanding that the most significant adaptations happen beneath the surface long before they become visible in your performance. You will not feel mentally stronger after one day of practice. You will feel it after months of practice, when you look back at the person you were before and recognize, with genuine surprise, how much has changed. Doubt will still visit. Fear will still appear at the threshold of meaningful action. Distraction will still compete for your attention in a world designed to capture it. But your relationship to all three will be fundamentally different. Instead of being subject to them, you will be their student and their manager. You will know how they work, what they are trying to protect you from, and how to move through them toward the life that is waiting for you on the other side of the resistance they create. That is what a strong mind actually looks like. Not a mind free from challenge, but a mind fully equipped to meet it. Chapter 9. Grow in silence and surprise the world with results. There is a particular kind of person that the world consistently underestimates. They do not announce their goals at dinner tables or post about their journey every step of the way. They do not seek validation at each milestone or need witnesses to confirm that their progress is real. They move quietly through their days doing the work, refining their skills, building their knowledge, and strengthening their character without any of the noise that typically accompanies ambition in a world that has confused sharing with doing. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, they produce results that leave people genuinely stunned, not because they got lucky, not because they had hidden advantages nobody knew about, but because they had been building in the dark, patiently and purposefully, while everyone else was busy talking about what they were going to build someday. This is one of the most powerful ways a human being can operate, and it is available to you right now regardless of where you currently are in your journey. The culture we live in has developed a deeply unhealthy relationship with the concept of sharing progress. Social media has created an environment where the announcement of a goal often receives nearly as much attention and emotional reward as the actual achievement of it. You post about your new fitness journey and receive 47 encouraging comments. Your nervous system registers that response as a reward. The dopamine hits, and something subtle but significant happens in your psychology. The goal begins to feel partially accomplished before any real work has been done. The social acknowledgement partially satisfies the need that the achievement itself was supposed to satisfy. And as a result, the urgency and hunger that would have driven you through the difficult early stages of the work quietly diminishes. This is not a character weakness. It is a psychological mechanism that researchers have studied extensively. When you tell people about an intention, particularly when they respond positively, your brain partially processes that intention as if it were already completed. The identity reward that should come at the end of the journey gets delivered at the beginning, reducing the internal pressure that would have kept you moving toward it. This is why so many announced goals never reach completion. The announcement was the event. Everything after it was supposed to be the sequel, but the main character had already gotten what they came for. Growing in silence eliminates this trap entirely. When you do not announce your goals, there is no premature reward. The only satisfaction available comes from the actual work and the actual progress. Your hunger remains intact, your urgency remains real, and the internal pressure to follow through, because you have made a commitment to yourself, without the social performance element, remains strong throughout the process rather than fading after the initial announcement receives its applause. Beyond the psychological advantages, silence during the growth process protects you from something equally damaging. It protects you from the weight of other people's expectations and other people's timelines. When you share a goal publicly, you invite the world into your process, and the world is not a patient or particularly understanding observer. People will ask for updates. They will notice when your timeline slips. They will form opinions about your progress. Some will offer encouragement, but others will project their own fears and limitations onto your journey, or they will offer the kind of skeptical questioning that plants seeds of doubt, precisely when your belief in yourself needs to be at its strongest. The early stages of any significant undertaking are the most fragile. Your belief is not yet fully formed. Your skills are not yet fully developed. Your systems are not yet fully tested. And in that fragile early state, criticism, even well-meaning criticism, can do damage that is disproportionate to its actual merit. A seed does not grow faster when you dig it up every week to show people how it is progressing. It grows fastest when you plant it in good soil, water it consistently, and leave it undisturbed in the dark until it is strong enough to break through the surface on its own terms. Your growth works the same way. The early underground phase of your development is not meant for public consumption. It is meant for honest struggle, messy experimentation, private failure, and gradual refinement. It is meant for the kind of raw, uncomfortable learning that produces genuine capability. And that process is almost always incompatible with the performance requirements of public sharing. Working in silence also develops a quality of character that is rare and deeply valuable. It develops the ability to find satisfaction in the work itself rather than in the recognition the work produces. This is a distinction that separates people who sustain long-term growth from those who burn brightly for a season and then fade when the attention moves elsewhere. When your motivation is rooted in genuine love of the craft, in genuine commitment to the goal, in genuine investment in your own development as a human being, it is essentially inexhaustible. It does not require an audience to keep burning. It does not need constant external reinforcement to stay alive. It runs on a fuel source that is entirely within your control. Contrast this with motivation rooted primarily in external recognition. When your drive comes from the need to be seen, praised, and validated, it is perpetually at the mercy of things you cannot control. Whether people notice your work, whether they respond as you hoped, whether the algorithm distributes your content to enough people, whether the people whose approval you value most happen to be paying attention at the right moment. This kind of motivation is exhausting to maintain and deeply unreliable as a foundation for long-term growth because it places control of your most important internal states in the hands of external variables. The silent worker has broken this dependency. They have discovered that the most genuine form of self-respect comes not from how many people are watching, but from the quality of attention and effort they bring to their own work when nobody is watching it at all. They have discovered that integrity, the alignment between who you say you are and how you actually behave when there is nothing to gain from the performance, is its own profound reward. Developing this quality requires practice. Most people have been conditioned since early childhood to seek and respond to external feedback as the primary measure of their performance. The grading systems of school, the approval structures of family, the social reward mechanisms of peer groups, all of these trained the nervous system to look outward for evaluation, rather than developing a robust internal standard. Reclaiming that internal standard is the work of deliberate, patient practice. Begin by setting personal standards that are entirely your own and independent of what anyone else might think. Not standards based on comparison with others, but standards based on your own honest assessment of what quality, integrity, and genuine effort look like in your specific context. Then hold yourself to those standards privately and consistently, regardless of whether anyone notices or comments or rewards you for doing so. Over time, meeting your own standards becomes its own form of satisfaction, and the quiet pride that comes from knowing you brought your genuine best to something, even when that something will never be seen or praised, is a more durable and nourishing feeling than any amount of public recognition. There is a particular discipline involved in staying silent about your growth during the periods when you are making significant progress and feeling genuinely excited about it. This is perhaps the hardest part. When something is working, when you can feel yourself improving, when the results are beginning to accumulate, and the vision is starting to feel genuinely achievable, the natural human impulse is to share that excitement, to tell someone, to post something, to let the world know that something real is happening. Resist this impulse selectively and strategically, not forever and not across every domain, but during the critical phases of your growth, particularly in the early stages of a new project, during a significant transformation, or while developing a capability that will eventually speak for itself through results. Practice holding the excitement internally and letting it fuel more work rather than releasing it through announcement. Every time you hold that excitement and channel it back into the work instead of broadcasting it outward, you are making a powerful choice. You are choosing depth over performance. You are choosing substance over appearance. You are choosing the kind of patient, committed work that actually produces the results worth sharing over the kind of premature sharing that substitutes for producing them. The world is full of people who are perpetually on the verge of something great. They talk about their ideas with remarkable fluency. They describe their vision in compelling detail. They post about their journey with eloquent self-awareness. And year after year, the great thing they have been on the verge of remains just ahead of them, always imminent but never quite arrived. Not because they lack talent or intelligence or even genuine desire, but because the energy that should have gone into building was continuously redirected into performing the building. You have the opportunity to be a different kind of person. The kind who does the work first and shares the results when they are real and undeniable rather than theoretical and aspirational. The kind whose silence during the process makes the eventual emergence of results genuinely surprising to the people around them. The kind whose reputation is built on a consistent track record of follow-through rather than on the eloquence of their stated intentions. Building this kind of reputation takes time. There are no shortcuts and no performances that accelerate it. It accumulates the way all real things accumulate, through repeated honest action over sustained periods of time. But the reputation it builds is of a fundamentally different quality than one constructed through self-promotion. It is based on observable evidence rather than presented narrative. It cannot be easily dismantled by a single failure or a single piece of negative feedback because it was never constructed from claims. It was built from results. The concept of working in silence does not mean working in isolation. It does not mean never seeking guidance, never collaborating, never sharing your work with people who can genuinely help you improve it. It means being intentional and selective about what you share, with whom, and at what stage of the process. Share your work with mentors, collaborators, and trusted advisors whose feedback will genuinely strengthen it. Share your struggles with people who have earned the right to that vulnerability through their consistent support and genuine understanding. But distinguish clearly between this kind of purposeful sharing for growth and the reflexive broadcasting for validation that social media has normalized. As you develop the practice of growing in silence, you will notice changes in your relationship with time. When you are not performing your progress for an audience, you stop measuring your journey in terms of how it looks to others and start measuring it in terms of how it actually feels and what it is actually producing. You stop rushing to reach stages that are presentable and start moving at the pace that genuine mastery requires. You stop cutting corners to maintain an appearance of progress and start doing the deep, slow, thorough work that actually transforms your capabilities. This shift in relationship with time is one of the most significant gifts of the silent growth practice. In a culture that celebrates speed and immediate results, choosing to give your development the time it genuinely needs is a countercultural act of profound self-respect. Some of the most important things you will ever build will take longer than you initially hoped. Some skills will require more repetition than feels comfortable. Some transformations will happen more slowly and less dramatically than you wished. But the things built slowly and thoroughly last. They become genuinely yours in a way that rushed development never quite achieves. Consider the bamboo tree, which spends its first 4 years developing an extensive root system underground, while showing almost nothing above the surface. To an observer watching from outside, nothing seems to be happening. There is no visible progress. There is no evidence of the enormous structural work taking place beneath the soil. And then, in its 5th year, the bamboo can grow up to 90 feet in a matter of weeks. The growth was never absent. It was simply happening where it could not be seen, building the foundation that made eventual visible growth possible and sustainable. Your silent growth period is your root system. Every book you read without announcing it, every skill you practice without showcasing it, every early morning hour you invest in your development while the rest of the world is still sleeping, every difficult lesson you absorb through failure and use to build more intelligent effort. All of it is root system. All of it is invisible foundation. All of it is preparation for a visible emergence that will happen not because you forced it through performance, but because the foundation finally became strong enough to support it. The world will be surprised. People who dismissed you, overlooked you, or simply never thought to consider what you were quietly becoming will find themselves genuinely startled by what you produce when you are ready to produce it. And in that moment, you will understand something deeply satisfying about the choice you made to grow in silence. Not because their surprise validates you. You will have long since moved past needing that. But because the gap between who they assumed you were and who you actually became is the clearest possible evidence of what focused, private, patient, unperformed work can do. Let the work speak. Let the results arrive when they are ready. Let the silence that preceded them be the foundation that makes them unshakable. And trust, with every quiet hour you invest in becoming more than you currently are, that what grows without an audience can surprise an entire world. Chapter 10. Commit to yourself every single day without giving up. Every journey of genuine transformation eventually arrives at the same defining moment. It is not the moment of first inspiration, when the idea of change feels exciting and full of possibility. It is not the moment of early progress, when the first results appear and motivation runs naturally high. It is the moment that comes much later, quieter and less dramatic, when the initial excitement has long since faded, when the novelty has worn completely away, when the results feel painfully slow, when nobody around you is cheering particularly loudly, and when every part of you that prefers comfort over growth is making a compelling case for stopping. That moment is where everything is decided, not by your talent, not by your circumstances, but by your commitment. Commitment is the most undervalued word in the vocabulary of personal development. Everyone talks about motivation, inspiration, mindset, strategy, and habits. But commitment is the quiet force underneath all of those things that determines whether any of them actually produce lasting change. Motivation will come and go, inspiration will visit and leave, strategies will need adjusting, habits will sometimes break, but commitment, genuine and deeply rooted commitment to yourself and to the life you are working to build, is what makes you return to all of those things after every interruption, every setback, and every moment of doubt. The distinction between commitment and motivation is one worth sitting with carefully, because most people confuse the two and suffer enormously for it. Motivation is a feeling. It is the emotional state that makes action feel easy, natural, and desirable. Commitment is a decision. It is the choice you make in advance about who you are going to be and how you are going to show up, a choice that remains binding even when the feeling that originally inspired it has completely disappeared. Motivation asks how you feel about doing the work today. Commitment says the work happens regardless of how you feel today. This is why people who rely primarily on motivation to sustain their growth are perpetually vulnerable. They have great weeks followed by complete collapses. They make significant progress and then lose everything they gained during the inevitable periods when motivation naturally ebbs. They interpret the absence of the feeling as a sign that something is wrong, that they are not truly meant for this path, that the goal was perhaps unrealistic, that maybe this just is not who they are. And with that interpretation, they stop. Not because the goal was genuinely unachievable, but because they were depending on a feeling to carry them through terrain that requires a decision. Genuine commitment to yourself is a declaration that your growth is not conditional on your emotional state on any given day. It is the recognition that you are going to have difficult months, discouraging weeks, and genuinely terrible days where everything feels pointless and progress feels impossible. And it is the advanced decision that on those days you will still show up in some form, even if that form is smaller and quieter than your best days. Because showing up imperfectly is infinitely more powerful than not showing up at all. The relationship you have with yourself is the most fundamental relationship in your entire life. Every other relationship you will ever have, romantic partnerships, friendships, professional collaborations, family bonds, will be shaped at its deepest level by the quality of this primary relationship. And like every meaningful relationship, the one you have with yourself is built or destroyed through the accumulation of kept and broken promises. Every time you tell yourself you are going to do something and then follow through, you build trust with yourself. Every time you make a commitment to yourself and abandon it when it becomes inconvenient, you erode that trust. And a life built on eroded self-trust is a life characterized by low confidence, persistent self-doubt, and a quiet but constant sense of personal unreliability that affects everything you attempt. Most people do not think about their relationship with themselves in these terms. They think about self-trust as a fixed personality trait, rather than as something that is actively built or damaged through their behavior over time. But consider how you actually feel about a person in your life who consistently promises things and consistently fails to deliver. You stop believing them. You stop depending on them. You adjust your expectations downward to protect yourself from repeated disappointment. Now consider whether you have been doing exactly this to yourself. Whether the commitments you have made to your own growth, your own health, your own development have been kept or abandoned often enough that some part of you has stopped truly believing your own declarations of intent. If the honest answer is that your self-trust needs rebuilding, the path forward is straightforward, even if it is not easy. You rebuild it the same way you would rebuild trust with anyone, through small, consistent, reliable follow-through over time. Not through grand gestures or dramatic overhauls, but through the quiet accumulation of kept promises, beginning with promises small enough that keeping them is genuinely manageable. Start with commitments so modest that failure requires genuine effort to achieve. Commit to drinking a glass of water every morning before anything else. Commit to 5 minutes of movement before you sit down. Commit to writing 3 sentences in a journal before bed. These are not impressive. They are not the material of inspiring social media posts. But every single time you keep one of these tiny promises to yourself, you are making a deposit into an internal account of self-reliability that will eventually fund the confidence to keep much larger ones. As that account grows, you will notice something shifting in how you approach bigger commitments. You will begin to make them with more seriousness because you have learned from experience that you actually follow through. And you will begin to feel genuinely motivated by your own reliability in a way that external recognition never quite produced. There is a unique and powerful feeling that comes from being someone you can count on. Not someone other people can count on, though that matters too. Someone you yourself can count on. That feeling is the foundation of genuine self-respect, and it is built exclusively through the practice of keeping your word to yourself. One of the most common obstacles to long-term commitment is the unrealistic expectation of linear progress. People commit to a path and expect that their journey will move steadily forward in a straight line from where they are to where they want to be. And when the inevitable plateaus appear, when they go weeks or months without visible improvement, when they seem to regress rather than advance, they interpret this as evidence that the path is wrong or that they are failing. This misinterpretation destroys more genuine potential than almost any other single cognitive error. Progress in any meaningful domain is not linear. It is cyclical, unpredictable, and often invisible for extended periods before becoming suddenly obvious. Learning a language feels stagnant for months, and then one day comprehension shifts dramatically. Physical training produces no visible change for weeks, and then the body adapts and transforms noticeably. A business builds slowly without traction, and then crosses some invisible threshold and begins growing rapidly. Creative skill develops imperceptibly through practice until something clicks, and the quality of the work jumps to a new level. These breakthroughs do not happen despite the plateau periods. They happen because of them. The plateau is where deep integration occurs. It is where the learning moves from conscious effort into unconscious capability. It is where the foundation is laid for the next visible leap forward. When you understand this, plateaus stop feeling like failures and start feeling like necessary phases in a longer cycle. You stop abandoning your commitment the moment visible progress stalls and start trusting the invisible process that is occurring beneath the surface. You develop the patience to stay on the path through the slow seasons, because you have internalized the understanding that slow seasons are part of every honest journey, not exceptions to it. Setbacks and failures deserve particular attention in any honest conversation about long-term commitment, because they are genuinely inevitable, and because how you interpret and respond to them will determine whether your commitment survives them. A setback is not evidence that your commitment was misplaced. It is not a signal to reconsider your entire direction. It is information. Specific, valuable, sometimes uncomfortable information about what needs adjusting, what was underestimated, what requires a different approach, or what internal limitation needs more deliberate work. The person who commits to themselves over the long term develops a particular relationship with failure that is fundamentally different from the relationship most people have with it. They do not enjoy failure. They do not pretend it does not sting. But they process it quickly, extract what is genuinely useful from it, and return to the work without the extended periods of self-punishment, discouragement, and avoidance that derail people who have not yet developed this relationship. They understand that failing at something is not the same as being a failure, that a bad week is not a bad life, that making a wrong turn does not invalidate the journey, that every person who has built anything genuinely significant has a history full of attempts that did not work, approaches that needed abandoning, and seasons that looked from the outside like complete collapse, but were actually, from the inside, the most formative periods of their entire development. Your failures are part of your story, not interruptions to it. Every honest account of any meaningful transformation includes them, and the commitment to continue after them is what ultimately separates the people who merely start from the people who finish. There will be people in your life who, consciously or not, will undermine your commitment to yourself at various points in your journey. Some will do this through direct discouragement. Others will do it more subtly, through consistent expressions of doubt dressed as concern, or through behaviors that implicitly suggest your growth is threatening to them, or simply through the ongoing presence of a lifestyle so contrary to your own developing values that proximity to it makes your commitment harder to sustain. Recognizing this dynamic is not about becoming suspicious or resentful toward the people in your life. It is about being honest with yourself about which relationships nourish your commitment to growth and which ones quietly erode it, and making intentional choices about proximity accordingly. The most committed people are not necessarily the most isolated ones. Many of them have rich, meaningful relationships and deep community. But they are intentional about who they spend the most time with and what influence they allow those relationships to have over their most important commitments. They protect their growth not with hostility, but with the quiet, firm selectivity of someone who understands that their commitment to themselves is precious and that not every relationship in their life is equipped to honor it. Recommitting is as important as committing, perhaps more important, because the original commitment you make is made in a particular emotional state, with a particular level of understanding, and with a particular vision of what the path ahead will look like. As you travel further into your growth, all three of those things will change. Your emotional state will fluctuate, your understanding will deepen and sometimes completely transform, and your vision of what you are building and why will evolve in ways you could not have predicted at the beginning. This means that your commitment needs regular renewal, not because the original one was insufficient, but because you are not the same person who made it. You have grown, and your commitment needs to grow with you. Set aside time periodically, perhaps monthly or at the turning of each season, to sit with yourself and consciously recommit to your path, not as a formal ritual, but as an honest internal conversation. Ask yourself whether the direction you are moving in still genuinely aligns with the person you are becoming. Ask whether your methods need updating. Ask whether your goals need refining to better reflect your current understanding of what you actually want. And then, having considered all of this honestly, make the choice again. Choose your growth. Choose your standards. Choose the version of yourself that you are committed to becoming. Not because you made that choice before, but because you are making it again right now, with full awareness of everything you have learned since the last time you made it. This practice of conscious recommitment does something powerful. It transforms your relationship with your journey from a passive one, where you are simply being carried forward by the momentum of an old decision, into an active one, where you are choosing your path continuously and deliberately. And a path that is chosen continuously is one that is lived with a quality of presence and intentionality that a path traveled merely on habit can never quite achieve. The version of you that exists at the end of a genuinely committed journey is not the same version that started it. Not just in terms of skills developed, goals achieved, or external circumstances improved, though all of those things will have changed significantly, but in terms of fundamental character. The qualities required to sustain long-term commitment, patience, honesty, resilience, self-trust, discipline, the capacity to continue through discomfort and uncertainty and disappointment, these are not just means to an end. They are the end itself. They are the transformation, The goals you achieve along the way are evidence of the person you became. But the person you became is the real prize. You began this journey at the beginning of this book by learning to silence the noise inside your mind. You learned to stop explaining yourself and let your actions carry your truth. You built habits that began reshaping your daily life. You protected your energy from relationships that were quietly diminishing you. You turned your attention inward and began the honest work of discovering what you are genuinely here for. You chose discipline over comfort and watched your reliability grow. You released the suffocating need for approval and tasted a deeper, quieter freedom. You strengthened your mind against the doubt, fear, and distraction that had been limiting your reach. And you learned to grow in silence, trusting the invisible process of genuine development without requiring an audience to validate it. Now you stand at the final and most important practice of all, the one that makes every other chapter mean something. The commitment to continue, to show up for yourself tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Not perfectly, not without struggle, not without days when the whole project feels impossible or absurd or simply too hard, but consistently, honestly, with the kind of patient, unconditional dedication to your own growth that treats your life not as something that is happening to you, but as something you are actively and deliberately building. Nobody is coming to rescue you from the life you do not want. Nobody is going to hand you the discipline, the clarity, the resilience, or the self-respect you are seeking. Nobody else can do the internal work that your transformation requires. This was always, in every chapter and every page and every principle explored in this book, about one thing: your willingness to choose yourself. Fully, repeatedly, without conditions and without expiration. Make that choice today. Make it again tomorrow. Make it on the days when it is easy, and make it with even greater determination on the days when it is not. Build the life that the person reading these final words deserves. Not someday. Starting now. Starting with the very next decision you make, and the one after that, and every single one that follows. You are worth the commitment. You always were. The only question that remains is whether you are finally ready to act like it.